Hi everyone and welcome back to SwitchUp. This is our monthly roundup. In case you missed some of our reviews, these are the 10 highest scoring SwitchUp reviews of June 2021. Just remember that because they've made our top 10 doesn't necessarily mean they're the greatest games ever. They are just, as I say, those highest scores. And we'll start at the lowest scoring game that made the top 10 and work our way up. Do subscribe if you enjoy the content, and with that said, what were the highest scoring games on SwitchUp in June? Well, let's find out. Coming in 10th place for the month was one of our more recent reviews, and that was Worms Rumble. This is an online-only action game with a real-time battle system. Gone is the turn-based battle system in Worms games of old, instead being replaced with a battle royale style system where you're looking to take out the other players and worm your way up the rankings. Glen. Ouch. Those puns. There are 4 game modes with Deathmatch and Team Deathmatch, as well as Last Team and Last Worm Standing. The game supports crossplay and does have some redeeming qualities. The Deathmatch modes, especially All Against All, were pretty fun and it does sell for a reasonably competitive price. Unfortunately though, the other 2 game modes were always essentially empty. The charm of the Worms franchise doesn't translate over very well to this format, and with no single player modes at all, there is the risk of the user base drying up. Not a terrible game, but it got a SwitchUp score of 67%. Now in 9th place for the month was World's End Club. This hybrid of visual novel, action platforming, puzzle sections was written by Kotaro Uchikoshi, whose other credits include the very popular Zero Escape series. World's End Club tells the tale of the Go-Getters Club, whose trip across Tokyo is interrupted by a meteor. After waking up in an underwater theme park, they're forced to play a game of fate by their kidnapper, where they must race to complete an assigned task or face death. While the story is definitely gripping, it does suffer from a few moments where the tone shifts unexpectedly, but the biggest downfall comes from the platforming sections, which just aren't much fun. It creates a situation where platforming fans won't enjoy them and visual novel fans may feel they drag the story down. Worth experiencing if you're a fan of the writer, but perhaps after a sale, and it got an overall SwitchUp score of 70%. In 8th place then was the recent Destroy All Humans, which was a remake of the 2005 game of the same name. This sees you control alien Crypto-137 as he looks to rescue one of his fellow comrades from a top secret facility on Earth and does a fair bit of DNA harvesting along the way. It's a third-person action game with sandbox levels where you have to complete a set number of objectives. There are some stealth-based and some more action-oriented levels, and you'll be using a host of weapons and powers along the way. The gameplay itself is still fun to this day. It can be a little mindless at times, but that's certainly not a bad thing, and the fact that you have a little freedom to complete missions as you see fit, especially in the late game, keeps things interesting. Cutscenes have been recreated and motion captured using more modern day techniques, but the visual fidelity is where the game falls down, with textures loading in late being a very frequent issue. The price is also pretty high considering the game's age, although to be fair, a mission cut from the original game has been added back into this version, which is a nice touch. It got a SwitchUp score of 71%. The 7th game then for the month was an interesting run and gun called Mighty Goose. This has clearly been inspired by some of the classics from the genre, most notably Metal Slug, and it delivered a very satisfying gameplay experience and ran at 60 FPS. Success in levels earned you new skills which you could assign to your character. You could find companions throughout the game to assist you in levels, and most levels ended with a larger than life boss battle. On the more negative side, the 2-player mode was a little lackluster, with player 2 having to play as one of the companion characters. Some may find the price a bit high for the couple of hours of gameplay, but the biggest gripe was just how difficult it became to see what exactly was going on the screen when all the action got frenetic. All in all though, definitely one of those pleasant surprise games that we come across every so often, and it got a SwitchUp score of 77%. In number 6, we've got Disgaea 6, which is a continuation of the series, this time focusing on the main protagonist, Zed, who is a zombie risen from the grave, and with one burning desire to destroy the god of destruction. The only issue he has is he's incredibly weak and pathetic, and to do so he'll have to die over and over again until he's even close to powerful enough. Now, I thought this was a really nice mechanic, as in some ways it gives the game a roguelike feeling, as you can go and face him quite early on in the game and essentially die, but you keep some of your core skills and abilities, and it allows the player to build themselves up and gives a real incentive for much of the gameplay, which is those tactical turn-based battles. There's a hub area with a lot of interesting mechanics in it, such as being able to create your own side characters and even petition the masters of the game to change the rules for you, and if things get a little bit too tough, then why not just cheat? You can go to the cheat bar and use a currency to gradually unlock things which will make the game easier. I had a few gripes with some of the control options and felt that the 3D camera wasn't fully utilized as well as it could have been, but overall I thought Disgaea 6 was a really funny and enjoyable game. It got a SwitchUp score of 78%. Then we've got the Falconeer, which isn't actually out yet. A slightly odd situation, but they released a very early build. There's going to be a little bit more content in the final build, but we still reviewed it nonetheless. Now, the Falconeer is a lovely game, created by a very small development team, which if I'm not mistaken, may actually only be one person. Everything you see here was created solely by him, and there are some really interesting concepts. For one, it's a fully open world, allowing you to fly where you want, stop at different ports, but there are different factions here as well. You can do jobs for each of them, and obviously that will then affect your standing with the others. There's a main overarching story, quite a few side activities to perform, but really that was the weakest area. It was in that side content. It felt a tiny bit sparse. There were some cool boss fights, and the inspirations from things like classic Star Fox can be seen and felt. I really enjoyed it, and it has a beautiful art style and lovely soundtrack. The only thing I didn't like were the slightly janky little images, the 3D designed models. They just didn't look very good. The Falconeer scored a SwitchUp score of 80%. In fourth place last month was the Ninja Gaiden Master Collection. This bundled together Ninja Gaiden Sigma, Sigma 2 and Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge into one package, and all three games are still great fun to play to this day. The first game's a bit more pronounced, with combat feeling quite measured and things being a little more grounded. The second starts to ramp the action up and is probably the easiest of the three, although in games this difficult that isn't really saying much. The third one is loud, over the top, and throws all sorts of blood and gore at you. It could be argued that the quality of the games degrades as you go on, but it's also nice that they do feel that bit different from each other. Performance-wise, they run at 60 FPS, although the third does experience some drops. But the biggest issue is that the use of dynamic resolution scaling to try and keep that frame rate consistent leads to some very odd, blurry looking levels. It really does feel like something they could patch out. Level 2 in Sigma 2 and the jungle stage in Razor's Edge being big examples of this. The positives definitely outweigh the negatives as far as we're concerned though, and it got a SwitchUp score of 82%. In third place for the month, we've got Alex Kidd in Miracle World, and it's not the kid. I think I might have dropped the into like one part of the review and someone in the comments was just weeping. So I'm sorry to that person. It is a sin to say Alex the Kid. But Alex Kidd in Miracle World is, in my opinion, the best way to re-release a retro game. It allows you to switch between the updated sound and visuals on the fly with the press of a button. But also, after you've completed the game, you then get the Master System version so that you can really go back and see how brutally difficult it was to get from start to finish with the lives you were given. It's pretty standard platforming adventure gameplay. One hit and you're dead. There are a few power-ups you can get. You can buy a couple of vehicles, such as the pedal-powered flying copter. You can swim under the water. But they were so faithful to the original, almost at times to a fault, with things like the rock, paper, scissors system feeling particularly irritating. Overall though, I thought it was an excellent game and I really enjoyed it. It scored a SwitchUp score of 85%. The second highest scoring game for the month then, another blast from the past, this was Legend of Mana. This is the fourth game in the Mana series and originally released in Japan for the PlayStation in 1999. While being an ARPG like the games it followed, it changed a lot up in terms of the gameplay formula, and a lot of its mechanics still feel very unique to this day. You're on the hunt for artifacts, and finding these allows you to shape the world map as you see fit, as placing said artifacts on the map opens up new areas to visit and quests to partake in. The placement of the artifacts can potentially close some quests off, so unless you play with a guide on your first go, there is scope for replayability, and you can also play the game with a friend courtesy of the local 2-player mode. There's so much more to mention in terms of the battling systems, weapon classes and pets that you can grow to assist you along the way. The biggest negative would be how the lack of an overarching storyline can affect the cohesion of the narrative, and a few of the mechanics aren't explained very well, but still it's a great game, and it got a SwitchUp score of 85%. In first place then, we've got Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, the remakes. These took the original great games, the excellent gameplay formula and general physics systems, and brought them up with a lovely lick of paint. They performed excellently on the Nintendo Switch. The only real issue I had was in the co-op play where you have split screen. The game obviously is using some heavy dynamic resolution scaling, so you will see a lot of pixelation, and the shadow maps across the board are quite low. The gameplay holds up excellently to this day, and I loved how working your way through the different challenges in each stage made the game feel a little bit like an RPG, allowing you to buy skill points to update your character or spend currency on tricking out your deck and your overall look. It's funny because Glen and I very often hear people say, oh, that game looks rubbish, and that's their marker for what makes something fun, but that just isn't the case. It doesn't really matter about the visuals, it's about that core gameplay, and I think Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, new lick of paint or not, shows how good the original was. It scored an overall SwitchUp score of 87%. So that's it for this month. A big thanks to Glen, who will be making this video and writing half of the things that I've read out. I'm sure many of you have realised that he is taking a bit of a break. I think we all need one every now and then, and yeah, I mean, he's still making behind the scenes, so it's not the best break in the world, but it is what it is. Thanks so much to all of you that watch the channel. If you enjoy the content, then do consider sticking around. And as always, for all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers, guys. See ya!